stop. Do not send that manuscript to your critique partner just yet. There are actually 7 silent killers hiding in your pages. They are bleeding pace, suffocating your voice, and they're making agents click delete before the kettle boils. So today, I'm going to help you hunt every last one. And the fixes, well, they actually take less effort than the bad habits you're currently fighting. Who am I? Well, I might not be Stephen King, but I have edited hundreds of novels and spent over a decade helping authors launch books that landed traditional deals, won awards, and have helped thousands of indie clients to stop crying over their track changes and actually start selling books. Also, after all of that, I still enjoy reading for fun, which must count for something. Kettle on, manuscript open. First mistake we come across all the time is editing while you draft. And here's how most writers operate. Write sentence, hate sentence, backspace, rewrite sentence, and mutter about flow. I actually had a conversation with someone today repeatedly talking about flow. So this is a real problem. And this usually happens because creator mode and critic mode are completely separate headspaces. Doing this at the same time is a bit like trying to juggle raw eggs while chainsaw carving an ice one. You just can't do them both at the same time. One on its own is hard. So you have to pick one. And so I call this the vomit and vacuum rule. You first want to do the vomit pass. So this is where you blast the story onto the page. There's no judgment. Just forget the grammar rules for now. Throw them out the window. You can even write, insert something cool here if you need to. But then you must, of course, come back and do the vacuum pass. So this, you want to come back at least a minimum of 24 hours later. And this is where you hoover up filler words, you tighten verbs, you fix continuity. I would even recommend you use a 25-minute Pomodoro timer. And when it buzzes, you're forbidden from editing what's above the cursor. I actually keep a sticky note on my monitor that literally says no polish till draft done in bright red pen. And I know it sounds a bit silly, but it keeps me on track. And I think we all need that reminder. Quick example I worked on the other day. First draft, it was the alleyway was dark and smelled like rotting cabbage. So not great, right? Come back to it in edit mode, and the way you would improve it and rewrite it is the alley reeked of sour cabbage and cheap fear. The 2 passes, as you can see, have led to a much clearer line. Now, even with the best will in the world, editing your own work is hard. Even having been an editor myself, I still hire other people to edit my own work. The reason is that your brain knows what it meant to say. And even when you're there going over it, you will think it makes sense because to you, it does. And so that is why it's important to have a sidekick who can grab you by the hand and guide you to the finish line with a professionally edited book in your hand. So we offer free editorial feedback on your work. There is a link in the description. Mistake number 2 is what I call the adverb avalanche and filter words. Here's an example. She quickly ran down the street. Crucially, pay attention to the quickly. That is 100% dead weight. If she's running, speed is already baked in. It's implied. And the same goes for filter words. Felt, saw, heard, noticed, began to, started to. They all act like this foggy pane of glass between your reader and the action. We don't want frosted glass. What we want is an IMAX production. The issue is that every unnecessary adverb equals 1 unit of reader trust lost. Stack 20 in a chapter and your prose sounds like a GCSE essay where the student is clearly chasing a word count. Now the good news is there is a simple fix you can use, and I call it the surgical strike search. Very simple, and it contains 4 lightning passes. So step 1 is to do the global adverb sweep. Open your document, hit Control or Command plus F, and then type ly and leave a space after the Y. Yes, that space is super important. And suddenly what you'll find is your screen lights up like a Christmas tree. Now those are the potential freeloaders that you want to get rid of. Step 2 is you want to do a filter word sweep. So use the search box again and run searches for words like felt, realized, heard, saw, began to, started to, and you want to highlight every hit. Then you move on to the 2-word test. So pause on each highlight and ask, do I need it? Do I absolutely have to have it? And if the sentence survives and usually improves without the word, well, then you know what to do. get rid of it. And step number 4 is to swap in muscle. So where the cut leaves a limp sentence, then what you want to do is trade up to a stronger verb or give a quick sensory hit. So again, as always, here is a before and after example. She quickly ran because she felt afraid. Not great. The after, she bolted, heart rattling her ribs. Much stronger verb, visceral detail, zero fluff, so much better. The bottom line here is you want to lose the crutches. Let vivid adverbs and sharp imagery carry the weight, and your prose will go from a GCSE essay to bookshelf worthy. I hope you're sticking with me. This is quite a dense video, but it has some absolute gems in here. Mistake number 3 that we see is dialogue mannequins, aka talking head syndrome, as I like to call it. Let's start with story time. You've got 2 characters parked in a cafe, and they are flapping their jaws for 4 pages straight. No gestures, no tension, just plot exposition, which is disguised as small talk. And your readers, well, they're now fast asleep. And agents, well, they're there hitting delete before the foam on their oat milk lattes has even settled. So why does this kill your book? Well, first, there are no visuals. It feels like a radio play drifting through a white void. Samey voices, everyone sounds like you after your 3rd espresso, and there's probably lots of info dump lines hiding there. So something like, as you know, Commander. Well, the secret here is, if they know, why are you saying it? So here is how you fix it, right? You use CPR, which stands for cut, personalize, and then reground. So cut the filler words, highlight every line that does nothing for the plot, character, or tension. If you can delete it and nothing breaks, it's gone. Get rid of it. Here's another example. As you remember, our ship crashed last week. Readers remember. They already remember, so just ditch it. Next, you want to personalize your voice. So give every speaker a verbal fingerprint, slang, rhythm, favorite curse word. A quick test is cover the dialogue tags. And if you can't tell who's talking, it needs a rewrite. Finally, you want to reground with beats. Every 3 or 4 lines, drop an action or a sensory hit. So we're not just in a blank room. Here's an example. She flicked ash into the saucer. So are we stealing the car or what? And you can see how that gives so much more to the dialogue and it moves the plot forward. And a bonus here is slip in subtext. Let characters dodge the real topic. Tension often lives in what's unsaid. Again, another example, let's say we have a character called Bob and he might say, nice day, Anna, as he eyes the divorce papers, right? So again, it just gives so much more to that setting for the reader. Here's another before and after, which I'm sure, as you can tell by now, I love these. I just think they make it so much clearer. So the before would be, so Captain Clark, as you know, the reactor core is overheating and we have to fix it quickly or we'll all die, he said nervously. Not great. After, what I would do, so this is the after when I've edited it. Warning klaxons howl. Clark slams a fist on the console. Core spiking. We've got 8 minutes. Move. As you can see here, the bottom line is ultimately it's so much more engaging. So you want to really get rid of the throat clearing, as I like to call it, the boring bits, and give each character their own mouth print. Anchor that chatter in the real noisy world. Your dialogue will then stop floating around and it will really start to crackle and pop, right? And that's what keeps pages and eyeballs turning. And if you need a second pair of eyes, I'm giving away free mini critiques on your manuscript. Yes, I'll personally hunt down your mistakes and show you how to fix them. Drop down to the link in the description, upload your book, and let's make your writing sensational. So mistake number 4 is the backstory bin lorry. I see this daily. And this is where, chapter 1 and the wizard protagonist that you have walks into a tavern and we sit through about 1,200 words about his second cousin's failed dragon farming startup. Meanwhile, your reader hasn't even decided if they like this character. You really want to think of story information like seasoning. A chef, for example, always salts after tasting. They don't empty the salt pot into the saucepan just because it's in front of them. This is where I would recommend you use the iced rule. I is for interest first. Hook me with action, mystery, or conflict. C is conflict escalation. You want to widen the stakes. And then E is the explanation later. So once I'm hooked and desperate to know more, That's the point at which you want to feed me the why. And then finally, the D is drip feed small teaspoons, never ladles, right? Because otherwise it's just too much. Let's take this example. King Theron sat on his jade throne thinking about the war with the southern tribes. He had once been a humble goat herder before the famine of, right? With this sentence, I would just be asleep already. So you want to re-engineer this, right? And then what you want it to become is blood spattered the jade throne. King Theron yanked his sword free, breath ragged, goat herders weren't supposed to kill generals, but here he was. You see the difference? And that now I'm hooked, right? Why the goat herders? Why? Where has the blood come from? And what was the battle about? These questions will buy you permission to sprinkle more backstory in later. To achieve this practically, you want to do an edit pass. So you want to highlight every paragraph that starts with when, back when, in his youth, once upon, or really any date stamp, and you want to challenge each one and ideally push it later, split it, or stash it between action beats. So the fifth mistake is what I call sanding off your voice. Autocorrect loves clean prose, and as a result, these tools can often bleach the personality from your manuscript. They end up looking like an email that's been sent from the HR department. They don't have any real personality to them. And so I'm a huge advocate for making your writing as deeply personal as possible. Your writing is a bit like a fingerprint. It's unique, and the more you lean into that, the more you will stand out. How do you spot your own voice vandalism, as I call it? Well, this is where sentences are now all the same length. Maybe your favorite weird metaphor got clarity edited, as it's often called. And the biggest concern is probably when beta readers come to you and say, it's fine. That's often the kiss of death if you hear that. So here is how you do a voice restore pass. You want to first read the entire chapter out loud. And anytime you smile, well, that's your voice, and you want to highlight that green. And anytime you yawn, that's beige, right? Highlight that in gray. And then so finally you want to re-inject the rhythm. And this is where you want to have short and long sentence patterns, rhetorical questions, regional slang, that cheeky aside that your uni tutor would have hated. Remember, grammar rules are ultimately guidelines. And if they start to choke the music, as it were, what you want to find are the lines that sing and really let them bellow. Next is mistake number 6, which is flat pacing and scenes with no purpose. Have you ever watched a Netflix show where 4 consecutive scenes are just 2 people at a cafe giving backstory, right? And that is your manuscript when pacing plateaus. Pacing is hard, and you've probably heard this mentioned a lot. Like I said earlier in the video, we hear a lot about flow, but we also hear people talking about pacing all the time. It comes back in almost every single editorial review that we do. So let me give you a DIY sense pulse check you can use. You want to start by making what I call the pulse sheet. Basically, you want a scene summary. What is the scene? You want to have a rating of tension, so 1 to 5, and then you want to have, the purpose, right? So it might be that the hero argues with mum. That is, the scene summary, and tension, you might put it as 2, but the purpose is that it reveals dad's death. And so you would have a few of these: gossip at the cafe, a burglary, maybe a hospital wait, and you would have the tension, and then you would have, why is it there? And basically what you want to look for is anywhere you have 2 1s or 2 2s in a row, that's a lull in your manuscript, in your story. And so you then need to add in a spike. So what you're looking for is to add in something with a tension of 5 or 4 or 5, gunshots, confession, ticking clocks, and then you can merge that with adjacent action. So you can see how it creates a better rhythm and just means you don't have these extremely boring bits in your manuscript where you can lose people. You can also use the 3-question scene test. So before keeping a scene, what you want to ask yourself is, does it advance the plot? Does it develop character? Does it maybe raise a new question? If the answer is no twice in a row, then you need to cut it, or at least splice it into a single good line that you can use somewhere else. And here is another key tip. Use cliffhangers. They aren't just for chapter ends. You can add an interior beat that is mid-revelation, so the reader sprints to the next paragraph. It's a very effective way to keep readers hooked. Think something along the lines of, she opened the ledger, and it moves on, to the next section of the book. So really, really important to use those as much as possible. And now mistake number 7 is proofreading with the same eyes. So put another way, with your eyes. So I have touched on this before, but basically what happens is your brain autocorrects your typos because it loves you and it wants to spare you the embarrassment, which, when you think about it, is a bit of a betrayal. And this isn't just some idea that's made up. There have been studies on this. It's called the proofreader's illusion. And basically it proved that when you reread your own text, high-level meaning predictions override the letter level checking that you're trying to do. And what that means is that obvious typos disappear. Eye tracking and letter detection experiments have also confirmed this familiar pattern. The more you know a passage, especially if you wrote it, the worse you are at spotting errors. Basically, your brain's predictive language model chunks common function words and fills gaps and just suppresses mismatched signals before they reach your consciousness. Here is what I call the triple threat proof method. The first thing you want to do is use a text-to-speech robot. So let your computer read the chapter while you follow along. You will be able to catch doubled words and missing words and things like that very clearly. Use ugly print, so change the font to Comic Sans, make it big, double line space. This is going to force your attention. And I would always impress upon you to use a 72-hour quarantine as a minimum. Finish, edit, stash the file, go outside, pet the dog, the dog for a walk, come back 3 days later with fresh eyes and you'll be like a sniper. And of course, finally, hire a professional. Trust me on this. No matter how good your Uncle Bob says he is at English, professional editors and proofreaders are undefeated. So if any of those 7 grenades have exploded in your manuscript, do your future self a favor, hit subscribe, ding the bell, and drop your worst editing horror story in the comments. The top 3 confessions will get a free mini critique from me next week. And if you want the lazy editor checklist in printable form, well then join the email list below. I will be sharing this in the weeks ahead, along with lots of other goodies. Finally, let me finish by saying editing is important, but never let perfection postpone the release of your book. Ship the story, then write the next one. YouTube's Clever Clogs algorithm reckons you'll love the video floating right here, so go ahead and click that one before your coffee goes cold.